We know how to diet, but not very many of us know how to eat. That was one of my favorite quotes from my conversation with Dr. Sarah Ballantyne. She has lost over 100 pounds 3 times, and she has learned a lot from those experiences. This conversation is about how to eat for health, how to get the nutrients that you need from the foods that you eat. If you're ready to break free from diet culture and ready to learn how to nourish your body for longevity and quality of life, you're gonna love this conversation. If you've ever benefited from the Daily Wellness Podcast, we'd appreciate you taking a minute to show your support of the show by leaving a 5-star rating and stellar review on your favorite listening platform.
Welcome to the Daily Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Melisha Meredith. I've led my family on a transformative health journey for over a decade, and now I help other families do the same. This is a place where busy moms can learn about healthy living. I hope that what you learn here helps you feel empowered to take the next step in your family's health journey.
Dr. Sarah, thanks so much for joining me on the Daily Wellness Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I have really loved getting to know you through social media and your book. So I'm excited to kind of dig in a little deeper to some of my questions.
Let's
um,
do it.
so one of the most fascinating things that you've shared about is just, you teach about health and wellness, right? And
Yeah.
you've done that for many, many years. How many years would you say?
13.
Yeah. So you've been in that space a long time, but you've also had your own pretty incredible health journey, which has included, losing over 100 pounds 3 times. I just
Yeah.
can't imagine like the emotional journey that was, let alone the physical journey. What would you like to tell us about that journey?
Um, oh gosh. I guess I'm really hoping that third time's the charm. Do you know what I mean? Like, um, there's some there's some things that are different this time, and I've only really just started talking about it because I think in the middle of it, I just felt I didn't feel very confident. I think I felt like I was going through a lot of personal growth, and I think that a lot of that personal growth is like one of the things that makes sort of like the maintenance part of the equation feel different this time. But I just had this like fear through a lot of it because it's like my third like I lost uh well over 100 pounds in my 20s,
Mm.
over 100 pounds in my 30s, and now I'm doing it again, just right at about 100 pounds in my 40s. And having to go through that and, like, it feels like sand through your fingertips when you're losing it,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's something that you feel like the harder you try to hold on to it, the easier it is to lose. And so even as I knew I was being successful losing weight this time, I was really reticent to talk about it. I think just because of that, like, I don't know yet if I'm gonna be successful, if I'm going to lose the weight that I want to lose, and do so in a way that's improving my health, not sacrificing my health for weight loss, because I think that's one of the big problems with weight loss diets in general is that you trade health for weight loss. And so that was really important to me, going into this. And, I'm just at about a year now of, maintaining this weight loss, and so now I sort of feel like, okay, I've gone over this, like, the first and second major hurdle,
Mm.
and I don't know what challenges lay ahead. Again, like, this is why I just say, like, I'm really hoping third time's the charm. I'm hoping I don't have to do this again. Um, but, um but yeah, so I'm just starting to feel a little bit more comfortable talking about it, I think just because it's a little bit more in the rearview mirror now than kind
Okay.
of like in the middle where there just was this sense of, I don't know, I didn't wanna jinx it. I think that is probably what it is, right? Like, this is going well, and I don't want to talk about it because I don't wanna focus on this too much. I was doing so much work, um, really, addressing food fear and expanding my diet and really getting rid like, it is a tough thing when you're so steeped in diet culture to really embrace a non-restrictive approach to diet. And even though I'm like writing about it and I'm reading all the psychology studies and like I know academically why this is really important, but like doing it is so much harder than
Mm.
knowing why it's important. So I think for me, there's a lot of like emotional processing that I need to do, a lot of therapy I needed to do,
Yeah.
um, to really, like do the personal growth part of the journey that needed to
Yeah.
happen for the physical transformation, which is like the happy side effect of the
Right.
emotional transformation. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, um,
Yeah. Well,
hoping
reason.
I'm hoping this is the time that sticks. That's
Yeah, I hope
hoping.
so too. I mean, that's amazing. One reason I really wanted to share about that a little bit is because in your book you shared a study, I think it was 2017, that said that like 42% of adults globally are on some kind of diet
Yeah.
for with a weight loss goal. And so I know this is so relatable for people listening, whether they want to lose 5 pounds or 50 pounds, or whatever it be. It's just top of mind for so many people. So what is it about this time do you think that's different than the other times?
Yeah, so I think there's 3 things that to me really stand out as being different. So first is just like my what I already alluded to, which is like my whole approach, and mindset around food. So, I'm doing things like focusing on the additions, right? Focusing on, making sure I'm getting enough protein, lots of, like, high volume, low calorie foods, right? So big salads, lots of vegetables, like really focused on the addition of those nutrient dense foods, balanced macronutrients. There's no low carb over here.
Yeah.
And then also still making room for what I call quality of life foods. So being really intentional to fit in. I have a bag of Hershey's Kisses right beside my desk, right? So like just making sure that I'm like fitting in treat foods, things that I really like. If I want to put cheese on my salad, I go ahead and put cheese on my salad, right? So I'm really focused on making sure that everything I eat is flavorful and enjoyable, and that I am really making sure that there's room for treats. So
Mm.
it's a more modest energy deficit, which is
Mhm.
more sustainable anyways, right? Like all the research would say, slow and steady is the way to win this race.
Yeah.
Um, and and yeah, I think I've finally nailed that like ability to, like, maintain an overall higher quality diet without, depriving myself of the foods I love. So, getting out of that restrict binge cycle has been huge.
Mm.
But it's not just the approach to food, right? So, the other thing is, like, I've been in therapy, and I've got some better skills now for, coping in healthier ways with big feelings and stressful events, that
Mm.
doesn't involve, comforting myself with food. So, and addressing potentially some of the root causes of, some unhealthy food-related behaviors. So
Yeah.
that has been a big difference this time. And then I think the other big difference is, um, my dog and my morning hikes. So I'm more active than I've probably ever been in my life, but it's mostly low strain activity. So I hike 3 miles up to maybe sometimes 4 every morning with my dog.
Mm.
And then I also strength train 3 days a week. So I'm doing something like 12 to 14 hours of activity a week. I average 17,000 steps a day. And what's great about that low strain activity, and it's in the woods too, so it's like
Y
my nature time, it's time by myself. My dog is a clown, so she's funny, right? Like, so I'm laughing. I get to
Getting
see
sunshine. Yeah.
getting sunshine, getting time in nature, getting activity, and I do that first thing in the morning. And my resilience has been so much higher since fitting that into my schedule. So just my stress is better managed. I sleep better. And it's made a really profound difference to my appetite and cravings.
Yeah.
So I think that's like the other thing that's like quite different now is just like the way I have structured my life and the way that I fit more low strain activity in and less actual like strength training and more intense activity. I think that's made a huge difference as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we're gonna talk a lot about food. Your book talks a lot about food, but that really sounds like you're taking a holistic approach to your health.
Yeah. I don't think you can take a non-holistic approach and be successful, right? Like there's so many things that affect our health that are outside of our control. Right? Not just genetics, but environmental factors, right? Environmental exposure, social determinants of health. There's so much that we don't have control over. But among the things we do have control over, there's a lot, right? It's not just food, it's sleep and activity and stress and how connected we are. It's how much time do we have in our own heads? Like just how present are we, right? Like those things, do we smoke? Do we drink? Right? There's so many
Right.
different health related behaviors that are um inputs into the health equation.
Mm.
And I think that over focusing on one at the expense of another, it never ends up working out, right? And then things never end up adding up.
Yeah, that's good. That's a really good way to put it. Tell us about your book. How did you come up with the name Nutrivore?
So I've been using the term Nutrivore kind of casually for a really long time. Um, I just to me, it was just something, came out of a conversation once, and I was like, "Oh, yeah." "Oh, an herbivore eats plants and a carnivore eats meat, and, oh, who eats nutrients? Oh, I could be a nutrivore," right? It was
I
just
love it.
like a funny little, you know how sometimes just, like, the greatest ideas come out of just, like, joking around? Yeah, it does. And so it's just become a term, like, I think I used it in an article in like 2014, right?
Mm.
Like it's just a term that's been floating around in my brain for a long time. But as I um, decided that I needed to leave my old wellness brand behind and build something new, and was really focused on the idea that, like, the thing that's missing in the wellness conversation, in the diet conversation, in the doctor's office, like, the thing
Yeah.
that nobody is talking about is, like, there's 49 essential nutrients, right?
Mhm.
40, and there's hundreds of other nutrients that are important, but technically non-essential.
Mm.
And we're always seeking to, like, distill what a healthy diet looks like to one thing to, like, count or one thing to avoid, right? Like, we want to just make this, like, all you need to do is, like, cut out these 7 foods for 7 days and you'll lose 7 pounds, right? Like, we are looking for the sort of, like, the quick fix, catchy soundbite version of what a healthy diet looks like, but we're really biologically complex. Nutrition is complex. That doesn't mean that a healthy diet needs to be complicated,
Right.
but we do kinda need to have that more sophisticated understanding of what nutrients are doing, how they're affecting our, like, current health experience, but also our long-term health outcomes. What what are the patterns, right? What types of foods have what types of nutrients? So how do you, like, what's the formula for choosing different foods so that you're getting that full 49 essential nutrients that our bodies need and all of the
Mhm.
non-essential ones that are important as well? And so that was, to me, the conversation that I didn't see online. I didn't see a resource that existed online that explained that in a way that was accessible to the public.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you think about it, right, getting the nutrients that our bodies need from the foods we eat is the most basic function of nourishment. It's what the word actually means, right? We're talking
Yeah.
about nourishing our bodies, nutrition, right? All the root of all of those words is the same as the root for nutrient, and yet the main conversation is restriction and food fear, and the psychological impact of that is exactly what I've experienced, right? It's the diet yo-yo.
Mhm.
It's the on again, off again. I'm, like, white knuckling it, and now I'm disinhibited and I can't control what I'm eating, right? And it's that cycle is what most of us are experiencing. And I think it's what the entire diet and weight loss industry actually relies upon in order to keep growing, right? It needs us to fail so that we'll buy the next thing. And so for me, as I was starting to build Nutrivore, really focused on nutrients and, like, how can we put an end to that cycle? Like, what is the information that people need to be able to improve their diet quality and still have
Mhm.
better health outcomes, but just, like, also stop dieting? And
Right.
to me, it's nutrients, right? That is the thing. That is the thing that's
Right.
missing. And so then Nutrivore became, like, the really obvious word to center my brand around,
Yeah.
because it is a diet where we focus on nutrients.
Right. So how is it that you help people understand the nutrient density of foods?
So I've developed a lot of tools. So I have different tools for different types of people, right? I think that the other thing that I'm trying to do with Nutrivore is really speak to everyone. So if you're somebody who's been steeped in wellness culture for a long time, and you're very, very intentional about every bite, I have resources that will help you maybe identify some nutritional gaps and some foods that can help fill them that are aligned with your dietary preferences.
Mm.
If you are getting most of your meals through a drive-through, I can identify some easy steps to just start small and start adding some more nutrient dense, health promoting foods in a way that fits your budget, that is no more time or energy, that hopefully are also foods that you like. And
Mm.
they're really, it's very, very simple. So what tool is right for which person?
Right.
And where's the focus, right? It really is like user dependent in that
Mm.
sense. But in terms of nutrient density specifically, I've developed a nutrient profiling method that I call the Nutrivore score, which is awesome because it rhymes.
It's awesome.
But it's a really straightforward calculation of nutrient density using the scientific definition of nutrient density, which is total nutrients per calorie. When I decided I was going to start building Nutrivore, the first thing I did was I'm like, okay, well, I need to be able to quantify nutrient density. So in the wellness community more broadly, for a long, long time, we've said eat nutrient dense foods, and we've had no way to identify what those foods are, right? So we've sort of been like, so like liver, duh, right? We can just like look at this list of like percent daily value per serving. We're like, yeah,
Mm.
that feels good. That feels like a nutrient dense food, right? Like it's all based on like gut instinct, which gut instinct not always right. So I'm like, I need a way to like mathematically quantify this and make it objective, right? So if I'm going to be talking about a dietary framework that is centered on nutrient density, I need a way to identify what a nutrient dense food is that is not gut feeling, but that is
Mhm.
math. And so the very first thing I did in developing Nutrivore was spend 3 months reading every single study that I could get my hands on in the field of nutrient profiling and specifically different methods of quantifying nutrient density. My original plan was I'm going to figure out what the best score is and I'm going to use that. And there's a few dozen that have been developed. There's like nutrients for calorie, calorie for nutrients, nutrient rich foods index, naturally nutrient rich foods, nutrient dense score. Like, oh my gosh, well, I'm lucky you did the research for us. Um, and yeah, it took about 3 months of just reading these papers. I still have, I ended up printing out a bunch of them so I could, like, highlight and take notes, and I still have this stack, like, this high of these papers. I haven't found a permanent home for it. It is still on my desk, all these years later, but I do actually reference it fairly often. So I'll be like, "Oh, which nutrients did this one use again?"
Mm.
So, um, I think maybe just because I'm coming at it from a different angle, right? My experience is not like bioinformatics, which is the main sort of like expertise that has gone into nutrient density scores in like research laboratories. My experience is much more on the like user application
Mm.
side as a science communicator. So I think my perspective is a little bit different, but I saw what I thought were really fundamental flaws in the reasoning that was going into those scores. So
Mm.
one of the things that has been happening in that field for a long time, so the scientific definition of nutrient density is about 20 years old. So most of these scores are 10 to 20 years old. And one of the things that they'll do is they'll come up with an algorithm, like how does this math work, right? So
Right.
very typical is to do a sum of nutrients divided by the daily value, so it's like a percent daily value, and then divided by the energy density, and that's also how the Nutrivore score is calculated. And then they'll go, okay, which 9 nutrients are we going to include in this calculation? And they'll try a bunch of variations of the calculation with 9 nutrients and see which one does the end result look like the healthy eating index, which is a measurement of how well somebody's diet aligns with USDA dietary guidelines for Americans.
Right.
And I'm like, why are we trying to retrofit to the healthy eating index? Those guidelines change every 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, hang on, can we not figure out how to measure the nutrient density of food and then see what that tells us and where we might need to fix the guidelines? Like, this feels like the wrong order to do things in. There's a lot of scores that cap, right? So they'll say, okay, but the most that you can have credit for is 100% daily value. I'm like, there's lots of situations where more than 100% is really nutritionally valuable, right? So like, if you're a smoker, you need more vitamin C than the average person, or if you're stressed, you need more vitamin C. Like, then wouldn't it be cool to know that this food has more than 100% daily value vitamin C per serving? Like, isn't that, like, we also don't always eat a serving. Isn't it cool to know that just a tablespoon of this food will give me 100% daily value per tablespoon, even though that's way less than a serving, right? So like, why are we capping it? Why are we penalizing? So this is the other thing that happens is that a food will get like points taken off for having cholesterol. Dietary cholesterol is only an issue if you have certain genetics, right? So if you have familial hypercholesteremia, yep, you need to worry about dietary cholesterol. The rest of us don't need to.
Right.
Saturated fat, well, does that have to do with the food or the whole diet? The whole diet, right? So we want to keep our saturated fat intake below 10% of calories, but just because one food has a lot of saturated fat, that doesn't mean it can't fit into a healthy diet. So why are we penalizing that one food, right? Or added sugars or sodium? And that just made no sense to me. So looking at all of that research, I was like, okay, look, algorithmically, what most of them do is a sum of percent daily values divided by energy density. That makes a lot of sense. Why aren't we just using every single nutrient we have enough data to use, which is what the Nutrivore score does? That makes a lot more sense. Why are we penalizing? We shouldn't be penalizing. Why are we capping? We shouldn't be capping. Why are we normalizing? Like, and the other thing they do is they'll take all the different food groups and they'll make the best food have a score of 100 and the worst food have a score of 0. But like, food groups are different. They give us different nutrients. And like, why are we making the most nutrient dense vegetable look the same as the most nutrient dense grain? They're not the same. Like, this normalization is also weird. So for me, I was just like, I'm going to keep this really basic, really simple math. So it's actually the biggest challenge in developing the Nutrivore score was tracking down the data because there's a lot of incomplete data out there. A lot of foods for which it's surprising. It's surprising how few foods we actually have a really comprehensive data set of all of the nutrients that food contains. So that was actually the biggest challenge. Because then once I decided on, okay, I'm going to do my own. It's based on the nutrient-rich food index, but it uses 33 nutrients. Then I spent about a year tracking down data. And I have a wonderful team member, Lisa, who actually took over this project and has documented every single, we have these, it's like this whole series of like nested Excel workbooks. They're very, very, very big files. They're very, very cumbersome and very, very slow to work with. But every single data point, we know exactly which study it came from or which database it came from. And she gets the full 100% of the credit for all of that like methodical record keeping because I just have scrap pieces of paper with lots of like random scribbles on it. That's how I was doing it on. I was doing it with scrap paper. But yeah, so the Nutrivore score is a measurement of total nutrients per calorie. I think it's the best option out there. There are some other options being developed that I think could be better. It's like the food compass. If they can figure out their current challenges with that, I think the food compass could be a really interesting, like superior measurement. And if something better comes along, like, I'm just gonna go with that. Like, but I'm just gonna go with whatever the best thing is that's out there. But I think right now it is the Nutrivore score. And
Did you find anything surprising as you were like giving
so many.
a Nutrivore score? Like, what were some
I mean,
surprising high ones or low ones?
yeah, I've got both, right?
Yeah.
So the single most nutrient dense food is canned clam liquid. If you had asked me what the most nutrient dense thing is, never in a million years would I've been like clam juice. It's got to be clam juice. It's because you get a lot of dissolved vitamin and mineral content in that like high heat, high pressure when you're like canning clams or boiling clams in before you can them. And so a cup of clam juice has 500% daily value of vitamin B12 and then like pretty good mineral content vitamins. So, and it's like 9 calories or something, 15 calories, like very, very low calorie. So that's why, like when you have a lot of nutrients in a very nutrient dense part because it is nutrients per calorie. That doesn't mean that we're starting a clam juice drinking trend here. Like that's not, it's not the goal. but it is just like to me, it's academically interesting that you could add something that might have been thrown out. Or like it's often used, right? It's used in clam chowder or linguine with clam sauce, right? There are some like typical recipes that kind of like, oh no, we're gonna make sure we use that flavorful liquid after boiling our clams. Um, but yeah, like that's just fascinating. Like I would have never. That's not ever what I would have. I would have been like liver or kale, like one of these
Right.
foods have very traditionally been thought of the most nutrient dense foods. Watercress, right? Like lots of different scoring systems come up with watercress as the highest, and it is crazy high. But clam juice is technically higher.
That's amazing.
So that is definitely one surprise. I was surprised how low coconut was. I mean, it's good. It's still a great food. Like it's still a worthwhile food.
But as far as the nutrient density packed in per calorie, not
Yeah, it's a very high calorie food, right? Because it's got quite high fat content, and compared to other nuts and seeds, it actually like it's about a third the nutrient density of walnuts. So that's not something that I would have guessed. I think we've got a nice little health halo around coconut as like this like magic food, and it's still a good food. It's just meh. Um, Iceberg lettuce is more nutrient dense than artichoke or sockeye salmon, um, or cucumber or celery. Like, and everyone likes to think of iceberg lettuce as cardboard and crunchy water.
I've always thought, I mean, I thought that for a long time.
Yeah, but it turns out it's a very nutrient dense food. It's not as nutrient dense as other lettuce types. Like other lettuce types have about tripled the nutrient density, but there's lots of people who only like iceberg lettuce. And so I can use the Nutrivore score to say, okay, here's a leafy vegetable that you like. Look how valuable it is. Go for it, right? And so for me, like the cool thing about the Nutrivore score is the permission structure around it, that it's really useful for getting over our um you know, basically like our biases that diet culture has taught us about foods. So yeah, the Nutrivore score is a very cool tool.
Yeah. What makes it different from kind of a fad diet mentality?
So Nutrivore as a dietary philosophy, the goal is to get all of the nutrients our bodies need from the foods we eat. And when you start taking that like whole diet approach, so you start just saying, you basically ask this question, right? So did all of the nutrients contained in all of the foods you ate today add up to meet or safely exceed your body's nutritional requirements, right? So did you hit the daily value and not go above the tolerable upper limit of all 49 essential nutrients? If the answer is yes, then you get a round of applause, a big green check mark, a gold star. Like that is yeah, like the round, like all the cheering, right? And that's it, right? It's just that like simple goal. Even better if we can also keep that reined in, so we're also within the range of your caloric requirements, your caloric goals, right? So we're going to try to hit the daily value of all essential nutrients and do that without going over in terms of your energy requirements. So when you take that sort of like whole diet view of like nourishment, right? How do we actually nourish the body? There's a couple of things that come out of it. So one is, okay, so let's say your calories were great. You hit the daily value of everything. Does it matter if one of the foods you ate was a donut? Right? And it brought up the calories and it didn't have a whole lot of other things in it. But your overall calories are good, all of your nutrients are good. No, it doesn't matter if you had a donut. Was the donut good? I hope it was good. I hope it was really tasty, right? Did it make you happy? Great. Like, so that automatically, when you take that whole diet approach, you end up with a permission structure rather than a restriction structure. Because now, like, it doesn't matter if every food contributed equally to the mission of meeting our nutritional needs. We achieve that goal, we get the round of applause and the gold star, even if one of those foods was a donut. So it automatically shifts how we think about food to what are the foods that I can add that are going to help me achieve this mission of meeting my nutritional needs? What are the important foods to focus on? And then where can I find the room for the foods that I really love that I don't want to miss out on, right? So it just kind of changes the entire way that we think about food. And the other thing that you see when you start going, okay, what foods do I choose so that I get the full range of nutrients, right? What are the miracle foods that are the ones I have to eat? And you really quickly see there's so many different ways to combine different foods to achieve this goal that you don't have to have a specific diet structure. You don't have to have you have to eat this, you have to eat this, just like you have you don't have to eat this or you don't have to eat this. Like suddenly we don't have any musts or must nots, right? But it also means that if you have a diet that you love, right? You're a vegetarian, for example. Okay, well, look, like we're gonna have a little extra, like a little extra math to do to like figure out where we're gonna get certain nutrients that are a little bit harder to get on this structure, but we can do it. Like it's absolutely possible. So when you start just looking at the bajillion combinations of foods that will meet our nutritional needs,
Yeah.
you see then how much flexibility there is in catering a healthy diet to your specific food preferences. So Nutrivore just gets to be that like education that informs food choices instead of a structure or a set of rules.
I love that. This is an interesting quote that I found from your book. It says, while some ultra processed foods can absolutely fit into the Nutrivore template, it can be challenging to switch to a whole foods focused diet while continuing to consume a lot of ultra processed foods. So, I mean, what kind of guidelines do you give? Like, is there a percentage of our diet that should be whole foods, or what is the kind of defining line? Yeah. Like, how can we kind of mentally wrap our mind around how much is okay and how much is not okay when it comes to ultra processed foods?
So we have a collection of studies that have done dose responses with ultra processed foods and generally show the cusp for negative health impact around 20% of our calories.
Mm.
Now, this is not doing the Nutrivore math that I would love to do of like, okay, but if you had these whole foods that have this much nutrition, right? Can we hit 40% of our calories from ultra processed foods if the 60% from whole foods is like really high quality and really thoughtful, right? I don't have like a scientific study to point to on whether or not that would still translate to the improved health outcomes that I would expect it would. Like that's my hypothesis, but I have not had the opportunity to test that hypothesis yet.
Yeah.
So I think based on the science right now, 20% is a really good, at least general guideline. But I think it's also important to understand that
Mm.
ultra processed foods is a really big category of foods. And there's a lot of foods that people don't realize are ultra processed that technically are, but that have tons of nutrition, right? It's like frozen dinners are ultra
Mhm.
processed. Canned soup is ultra processed. That fruit on the bottom yogurt is ultra processed, right? Instant oatmeal is ultra processed. And those are all foods that I would say are, nutritionally very valuable foods and absolutely worth inclusion in your regular rotation. So I think that if we take the loosest possible definition of whole food, I
Mm.
think that is the other way to go about this, right? So we'll say, okay, 80% of our calories to come from whole and minimally processed foods, but taking the loosest possible definition. So if we can basically point to, let's say, a Nutrivore score over 100, 150, right? A food that's going to have more nutrients than calories, then we're going to call that a whole food. If I could have probably made at least something close in my house, I'm going to call that a whole food, right? Like I'm going to take the loosest possible way of defining whole food, and I think that is the best way to go about it. And then ultra processed foods can be like how we incorporate those intentionally. They can be those quality of life foods that make sure we're getting enough joy from our diet so we can stick to it, right? Like if you're somebody who absolutely your favorite food ever is Doritos, like you can fit Doritos into a healthy diet. It's just you can't only eat Doritos, right? Like,
Right.
but we can do this in a way where there's room for it. Or it could be just like really cool like sauces and dressings that make your healthier food flavorful. For me, it's always dessert. Like that's always the food I'm going to like get my quality of like famous like whatever that yeah, whatever's gonna have sugar in it, that's what I choose. It could be budget stretching foods, right? So it could be just the things that are like super cheap and easy. It could be foods that save time, right? It could just be that convenience foods. And I think what's really empowering is that when you take this goal of, I'm just going to try to meet my nutritional needs from the foods I eat, it really gives us permission to embrace these foods that most diets would teach us are no foods. They're bad for us. So they're things we have to avoid. And instead, we get to embrace them as really valuable tools for consistency.
And the feedback that you're getting from people and your own experience as those restrictions kind of go down, the sustainability goes
Oh,
up.
I mean, it's 100% my experience.
Yeah.
But I would say that is the number one like testimonial that I receive is Nutrivore has finally allowed me to like finally be consistent with
Mm.
healthy eating patterns, right? Now that I'm making room for quality of life foods, but I'm focusing on what I add, I'm finally able to stick to something. I'm finally reaching my health goals. I'm finally losing weight, or I'm finally my cholesterol has finally dropped, right? It's those that is the number one feedback that I get. The number one type of review that's left for my book on Amazon is that overall sentiment. Like this has been so liberating, and yet being liberated from diet has actually allowed me to adopt a healthier diet.
Yeah. That's awesome. When it comes to like nutrient deficiencies, as your Nutrivore score, does it kind of help you know like how to
Mm,
address some deficiencies that you know or suspect that you might have?
That's a really good question. The answer is no.
Mm.
So the Nutrivore score should not be the only number we look at. So just like we said at the top, right? We never want to distill diet down to one thing. We also don't want to distill it down to just the Nutrivore score. So the Nutrivore score is a measurement of nutrient density. It's fascinating. I've learned so much from it, but there's things that it cannot tell us. So it cannot tell us how how much nutrition we're getting from how much we're eating, right? So that would be nutritions per serving or per portion, right? So that's a different bit of data. It
Mhm.
doesn't tell us what nutrients that food has.
Mm.
So that we're getting a clue from like the food group, right? So we can kind of say, right, if it's a nut, it's going to have these kinds of nutrients. If it's fish, it's going to have these kinds of nutrients, right? So that is a different piece of information that we want. And it also doesn't tell us how that food contributes to my specific diet, right? So like how does it fit in? What is the puzzle piece that it's filling
Mm.
with all of the different foods that I'm eating? And so if I know, hey, I've been dealing with zinc deficiency and I really need more zinc rich foods, I cannot look at just the Nutrivore score and be like, aha, those are the foods I need to eat. I need to look at either the patterns of the food groups. So in this case, shellfish would be my best choice. A lot of meat is also a really good source of zinc, right? So I would go to like the patterns. What are those foods? And then I would go to something like a food tracking app that gives you micronutrient data, right? Like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer. There's dozens of options out there now. I hope to eventually have an even better alternative for everyone on that
Right.
front. But I would go to something like that and go, okay, now I'm gonna put these oysters in here and then see what my zinc levels are, and I'm gonna
Right.
talk to my doctor and see what they say they want me to eat in terms of like what's my zinc target for me to address my deficiency, which is a little bit different than just trying to get up to the daily value if you have a deficiency
Right.
often. Not every nutrient. Some nutrients you just want to hit the daily value, but some nutrients you want to be getting a little bit more until you've brought your
Right.
levels up. So talking to my doctor and not a stranger on the internet and getting a specific recommendation for me and my situation.
Mm. And you talked about getting that from food versus supplements. Can you kind of talk about your thoughts on supplements and how they do or don't fit into a healthy diet?
So this example is actually a really good example of where supplements can be incredibly useful tools. So if you have a deficiency, right, vitamin D deficiency, really, really hard to address through food alone. Like you can be slicing your mushrooms and leaving them out in the sun to build to build up the vitamin D in them every single day. That still might not be enough vitamin D to bring your levels up. Unless you're like also sunbathing, right? Like there, it's very, very hard to get vitamin D levels up without a supplement. It's possible, but it takes some serious like food lifestyle biohacking.
Mm.
So this is a great example of where, like, yeah, then take a vitamin D supplement. Please work with your doctor. Please get a personalized recommendation based on your test results from your doctor. Please retest to make sure you're getting enough vitamin D and you're not overshooting the mark, so you're not causing vitamin D toxicity, and you're still actually successfully addressing deficiency. So,
Mhm.
like, work with a professional. Again, not a stranger on the internet.
Right.
But this is, like I'm not anti-supplement. So, like, the other place where supplements can be extremely useful is, so let's say you're not just vegetarian, let's say you're vegan. Well, there are certain nutrients that is near impossible. I won't say it is impossible, but like vitamin B12, there's only a couple of vegan sources and they're very, very low amounts of B12, right? Like there's some in natto and tempeh, right? So like some fermented soy products, right? It's such a small amount of vitamin B12, it's very hard to get enough of. So you're probably going to need a B12 supplement. You might need a zinc supplement as well because plant sources of zinc, that zinc is less bioavailable. So you have to like get even more than the daily value. That's just a bigger challenge. So you may need some zinc. Iron is going to be another challenge, right? So we know vegetarians and vegans have a higher rate of iron deficiency anemia, right? So if that's the case, right, so this identifies the need for a supplementation strategy, and it's another way that the, like, broad nutritional sciences education that I'm creating with Nutrivore
Mm.
can be extremely useful because we're not going to, um there's no such thing as a perfect diet. And the motto that I operate on is nourishment, not judgment. And so, while it's preferable to get nutrients from food, it tends to be more bioavailable, tends to
Right.
have synergistic different nutrients that work together in it. You're going to get more than just one nutrient when you're getting it from a food compared to an isolated supplement. So it's preferable to get it from food, but sometimes it just doesn't work with your chosen diet, or maybe you have strong food aversions and you have a very limited number of safe foods, right? So in that case, a food-based approach is not accessible to you, and the same education that I'm hoping most people will use to identify some foods they can add to their diet to meet nutritional gaps can also identify the need for a supplementation strategy. So I'm not anti-supplement, but more judicious use of supplement.
Right. A couple more questions I really wanted to get in. You just mentioned the synergy of foods, which I find really fascinating. Um, I heard you talk about. Can you give us a couple examples and why that's so beneficial and actually just cool that food can do that?
Yeah, I think so. Like big picture, there's so many different nutrient interactions. Some nutrients that work together, some that compete with each other for absorption. So one can block absorption of the other, right? So, like just iron, because we're sort of talking about anemia. If I can remember these accurately, this is which wasn't prepared for this oral exam. So we're just going to add a little like um, you can go to the iron article on Nutrivore.com to just fact check me, I think would be great. But vitamin A is really important for iron metabolism. Zinc is really important for iron metabolism. I think it's chromium and manganese, I think, compete with iron for absorption. Um, so we've got like even if you have iron deficiency anemia, there's more than just iron to work on getting. And if you're getting your plant sources of iron instead of animal sources of iron, then you want to add vitamin C, which reduces the iron into a more absorbable form from the forms found in plants. So we've got like all of these different interactions. So it's a like I can come up with like here's two examples, right? So vitamin A and zinc are really important for iron absorption.
Mm.
Oysters are really high in iron and zinc and vitamin A. Liver is really high in iron and vitamin A and zinc, right? So we've got these like foods that kind of have all of those things in them so that we're going to be able to absorb that iron better and use it better. And then in plant foods, you kind of have the same thing, right? So spinach is also a really good source of vitamin C, but it's a really good source of plant iron. So you also will kind of see you see in nature that often you have this package of like nutrients that work well together. I do think that overall, unless we're dealing with deficiency, right? Like, so unless we're anemic,
Mhm.
typically don't need to really worry about this. Like, it's a really complex world, and daily values are generally in a range where this is well accommodated for. We've already kind of corrected for this, and we just need to think about what types of nutrients we're getting. Are we getting enough to hit the daily value? We
Mhm.
don't really need to I don't I understand that diet culture has taught us all to overthink diet a lot. And so one of the things that I would like to encourage is like, it's okay. We don't need to worry if your carrot has the same amount of vitamin C as my carrot. Like, it's okay. It's okay. Our carrots are both good. It's fine. Like, I think it's really easy to get into, like, a huge number of the questions that I get on social media is, well, does this count? Right? Like, oh, grapes have this thing. Can I eat raisins? Yeah. Yeah, you can eat. Yes. Yeah. Well, it just has a little bit less. That's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Yes, you can definitely eat raisins, right? Like, so that type of, um, that it all falls under the banner of
Yeah.
overthinking, and I get it because I've been there.
I think
And that's so much.
overthinking, but also probably just wanting a checklist of to know how to do it right. Right? Yeah. With someone, it'll be like, just tell me what to do.
So, but I've also created that checklist. For the person who uses the checklist, I have a tool called the Nutrivore Weekly Serving Matrix. It is in my book, Nutrivore, or there's a digital resource available on my site, nutrivore.com. And it is that formula. So it is, there's daily serving targets at the top and weekly serving targets on the rest of it, to just like address those food families that when you do that, granted, you've got a choice of 20 different foods for this one and 30 different foods for this one. So depending on exactly what you choose, you may, the exact math will work out a little bit differently.
Mm.
But it is, there was so much different, like, different combinations of math that I did in the development of this, and a lot of science that went into it, to basically create that really simple formula that if you need a checklist, if you need to know, okay, tell me what to eat, I've got that for you. And you can also use it to track your progress. So as you're
Mm.
trying to work on adding more of these nutritionally important foods, you can use this as a little place where I remember when I was a kid, I grew up playing violin, and we would have these, like, we had this little chart where we would get a star every day that we practiced, and we get this little star sticker. This is kind of like the grown up version of that. We're
Yeah.
like building this important, as a young violinist, it was really important that I practiced every day. I was building that habit, and now as an adult, I'm building the habit of eating cruciferous vegetables every day, right? So it's the same type of little positive reinforcement. So it's a way of keeping track, and it's a really sophisticated formula for making sure we're getting the full range of nutrients that our bodies need. But it's also that little, like, positive reinforcement because it's very satisfying to check off a box and then see all of the boxes checked off at the end of the week. So there is also that formula for people who need it. I've really
Yeah.
tried to craft resources for the full range of people, no matter what your starting point is.
Yeah. So one heart message that I feel like you just radiate, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but as I have gotten to know you and learned from you, something that I feel like just comes from you naturally, maybe because of your own health journey, is that you're really trying to help and support people that are trying to approach their food um, in a more healthy way, or maybe they're trying to lose weight or whatever it is, but they are coming from a place of disordered eating, or, whether that's binging or just dealing with shame, blame, guilt, all of those mindset things. Um, can you kind of talk to us about what your advice would be for people who really want to just build a more healthy lifestyle, get some of these more nutritious foods into their diet, but are really struggling with that mindset piece?
Yeah. So this phrase has been echoing around in my head for the last week or so. And I actually, like, wrote a new article on the site this week that incorporated it,
Mm.
which is, if I don't know, I think I'm always in the search for, like, the perfect soundbite for what is Nutrivore. Maybe that's what this is. I don't know if I'm there, but just thinking about it in terms of teaching people how to eat instead of teaching people how to diet. We all know how to diet, but not very many of us know how to eat. And that is what Nutrivore, that's the problem that Nutrivore is here to solve. And I think that, one of the big challenges to overcome is how much wrong things we learn from dieting. We learn a lot of fear. We learn a lot of guilt and shame, right? Like, that's a bad food and I'm a bad person if I eat that bad food.
Mhm.
We learn a lot of assumptions of others, right? So the same moralization of food that makes it so hard to stick to overall healthier eating patterns is the same moralization that goes into judging somebody. If you see somebody, you judge them based on their physical appearance and assume that they must be eating a certain way, right? Or they must be lazy or whatever, right? We've got these sort of, like, healthist views of others that are informed by that same set of judgments of foods that we then apply to people. And it's not as simple as learning the nutritional value of iceberg lettuce and then being like, yay, I'm so liberated and I have permission to eat my favorite lettuce, right? It's a little bit more sophisticated than that, to let go of some of these really like deep-rooted prejudices about foods, right? Like, we are told by every diet that you're not allowed to eat chocolate cake, right? I mean, beyond your birthday, you can have a piece, fine. But the rest of the time, you're terrible if you eat chocolate cake. But like, I'm here to say, no, I can craft a nutrient-dense, health-promoting diet around a piece of chocolate cake for you. Like, I can make that happen for you, so that you can enjoy that piece of chocolate cake every single day if that is the food that it gives meaning to your life, right?
Right.
And I think that wrapping our heads around, wait, I'm allowed to have that. There's a couple of interesting things that happen. So first, when we start working on ditching restriction, we are disinhibited. Like, there is like a rebound period of time where like, okay, I'm telling myself I'm allowed this chocolate cake, but then I'm going to eat it until I feel sick, right? Like that is that's part of the transition. That's part of the healing process to like, okay, but I'm giving myself full permission to eat chocolate cake, and now I'm eating all of the chocolate cake, right? There is a little bit of a adjustment period. That's not because you've given yourself permission. It's because you restricted it for so long. It's because you viewed it as bad for so long. And so part of recovering from that, for a lot of people, is going to be overdoing something. And so understanding that's coming, I think, is a really important piece. But there's an emotional aspect to this that no amount of nutritional sciences education is going to be able to address, and that's what other professionals are out there for. So whether that is a therapist, that is what has been very helpful for me, but it could be an intuitive eating counselor, an anti-diet registered dietitian or nutrition specialist, somebody who can help you with the emotional processing around a permissive approach to diet. That is going to be a really important expertise. Like, I would say start on the journey and see how it goes, right? But don't feel like you're a failure if you need to use these other, other forms of expertise, these other professionals in your life to help with the emotional processing to get to a point where food is no longer in control of you. Because that is what has happened with diet culture. We have given control of our food choices to the food, whether we're in our restriction mode or our binge mode. Either way, we have given over the choice to something that's exterior to us. So a part of this emotional part of this journey is finding power in food choice, finding like a self-nurture in food choice, and finding freedom in food choice. And that kind of comes with the emotional processing that has to come with that territory is a lot to undergo on our own. So just, heads up. You might want a couple therapy sessions to kind of talk through our feelings about chocolate cake, and that's good. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you.
Right.
That is just the natural consequence of decades of social programming around food. So if you need that, recognize it and go seek it out, because that is the liberation on the other side is worth it.
Thanks for listening to today's episode on the Daily Wellness Podcast. We hope that you found it helpful for your own wellness journey. And if so, we'd love for you to leave a review. Then come back and listen for review shoutouts on upcoming episodes. For more information, check out the show notes and connect with us on our website, dailywellnesscommunity.com.